Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fifth in a series of webinars on CO2 pipelines. Understanding the real economic impacts of CO2 pipelines. My name is Lan Richard, and I am a co-director of the Eco-Justice Collaborative and a member of the Coalition to Stop CO2 Pipelines. Our topic tonight deals with the economic promises often made about major infrastructure projects such as pipelines. It's quite common for major construction projects seeking public approval and/or funding to predict eye-catching numbers of jobs and enticing economic returns as justification for embracing their proposals. Impressive statistics are published on glossy brochures or in polished PowerPoint presentations. But what is behind those numbers? Are they real? Can we count on them? What does it mean for our own communities? Local leaders and good decision makers must do what is best for their constituents, balancing the long-term costs and impacts of a project against the likely benefits. But sorting through all the numbers and promises is not easy. Tonight's webinar is intended for county board members, for township commissioners, municipal officials, residents, and essentially anyone who wants to better understand what published economic predictions mean, where they come from, and how reliable they are. Before we begin, I want to make one announcement, and that is we now have several CO2 pipelines proposed from the Midwest. Many of you know that. Tonight's webinar is applicable to all of them. But we also have one that has recently filed for approval with the Illinois Commerce Commission, and that's the Navigator Heartland Greenway. For those who are concerned about the Navigator project, there's only one way to oppose it at the ICC, and that's to formally intervene with legal representation. I've been asked tonight to announce that a new group has been formed. It's called the Citizens Against Heartland Greenway Pipeline. And this group is open to all landowners, residents, and others who'd like to pool their resources and hire counsel to represent their interests before the ICC in opposing the pipeline. If you or someone you know would like more information on this group, you can find it on our website at www.noillinoisco2pipelines.org. Now I'm going to turn over the program to Mr. Rick Secchi. He is a member of the board of directors of SOIL, Save Our Illinois Land, and also a member of the Coalition to Stop CO2 Pipelines. Rick is going to introduce tonight's speakers. I might say if you have any questions during the presentation, we ask you that you type them in using the Q&A button you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And then after Dr. Secchi's presentation, we will take those questions, and if you would like, we will unmute you and allow you to ask those questions directly, or we can just read them back. But we will do our best to get all questions answered as much as we can. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Rick.
Okay, everybody. Well, thank you very much indeed for the introduction, and thank you for attending this webinar. I'm going to introduce Dr. Secchi, who's our speaker for the night. She's interested, she works for the University of Iowa, and she's interested in the nexus between humans and environment and the tools and methodologies we use to understand it, the policies we adopt to change it, and the way of teaching it. Most of her work is focused on the Mississippi River Basin, and she's done research on such things as land-based energy production, water quality, and the adaptation to climate change. She's trained as a natural resource economist, and she identifies as an economist, a geographer, and a transdisciplinary scholar. Last month, Dr. Secchi did a wonderful presentation for a similar group to ours called a national group on CO2 pipelines called CO2 Plenary. We were very impressed by that. And she took apart the report that Summit Pipelines, the other Midwest pipeline that's mainly through Iowa and north, They have issued a report on all the wonderful things that I would get the benefit from their CO2 pipeline. And they showed that even though the report that Dr. Secchi showed that even though the report supposedly came out from the reputable company Ernst & Young, it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. All they did was to check the math of the company and publish it with all manner of provisos and caveats and so on. So although Navigator has not had the benefit of having their statements blessed by Ernst & Young, they have produced statements of the benefits of the pipeline for each county that it will go through. And we asked Dr. Secchi if she would look at some of their claims and tell us how much we can rely upon them. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Secchi.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I have some slides to share with you. So I am going to focus very much on the Navigator and the Heartland Greenway presentation. But I want everybody to be aware of the fact that these claims and the exaggeration of these claims is very typical of all these projects. And then, as we will see in a little bit, the reality is not quite as rosy as it is painted. What is the typical strategy here? And this is something, by the way, that you see this as Dr. Crompton has written a lot about these economic impact studies. He's a professor at Texas A&M University. And essentially, he has identified this tendency for industry to hire consultants. He works in the area of sports events, but this is very similar to what has happened for Keystone, the Dakota Access Pipeline, all the pipelines we've seen, not just CO2 ones, okay? They hire typically big names, and these big names, as Rick was saying, essentially regurgitate data that is given by the company. There is no third party, way to confirm whether these data are realistic. And again, I'm going to show you some numbers that really kind of like made me suspicious as I was looking at the these glossy flyers regarding the pipeline from Voyager. Now, typically the consultant is very savvy, and they are very good at covering their own behinds. And so this is in the case of the Summit CO2 pipeline, the pipeline that is going to go across the state of Iowa, right? And it's proposed to go all the way up to North Dakota. And what you see is this is usually what happens. There's all these limitations that these, in this case, Ernst & Young, this expensive consultants, put at the end or in a kind of like hidden small print, or sometimes in the letter that accompanies the report, okay? And essentially they say, as Rick said, the report is not worth the paper it's written on. We assume no duty, obligation, or responsibilities. It's not designed for use by third parties. So county boards of supervisors should not, and they're telling you that, use those numbers to decide, the economic impact of the pipeline in their counties. Now, the Heartland Greenway strategy and those flyers that they have put together, those in infomercial, glossy couple of pages that they've put out, are the most egregious ones I have seen. It's not clear who did the analysis. It is not clear what qualifications they had to do the analysis. At least the Summit guys hired Ernst & Young. There are absolutely no details on how the analysis was run. It's not clear what model they used, what assumptions they made. So it's it is, you know, and I've looked at the Keystone, I've looked at the Dakota Access, I've looked at other pipelines and other economic impact studies. And this is the worst one. I don't even want to call it a study. You know, I guess they maybe figured out that if they give details, people will understand and appreciate how ridiculous the claims are. And so they've just decided not to give any details, okay? Let me tell you some of the common issues, and I'm gonna focus on the jobs here. Again, we don't know what kind of assumptions they have made here, but typically these construction jobs are very specialized. And so a lot of times the people who come, they're specialized and temporary. So the people who come to build the pipeline are not local. You know, they're traveling. Some of them are employed by these national, very specialized, again, pipe fitting outfits. Sometimes there is intense negotiations with the local union to make sure that at least some of the people are local. Okay, so there's no details here about how many of these good paying jobs are going to be for locals or not. And because, again, because the pipeline is a temporary project, what does that mean? It's not clear here. Are these the jobs on average for the 5 years of the period of construction of the pipeline? Are they the peak jobs? Because if you look at their infomercial, essentially there is a ramping up to construction, and then 1 year they have a maximum amount of jobs, and then it goes down immediately, right? So, you know, if it's a 1 year job, and this is the same thing, by the way, that Summit has been doing, you know, they give you like the total job years or the average jobs. Well, these are not, you know, if somebody is coming from Texas or Louisiana to do this job, and, you know, they're maybe going home for the weekend, you know, they're not really contributing to the local economy as much as you would think. The other thing they do, and again, this is very typical, employment opportunities at peak construction, right? So this is, they're saying it's that year, which I think is 2024, where they have the highest number of jobs. This number includes direct and indirect employment opportunities. I don't know what it means that they use this term, because this is not a term that is normally used in the literature. But by direct employment, they mean, you know, people who work in the hospitality industry, people who, you know, if you were just there for 6 months to do your job, maybe you're just renting a room in a extended stay motel, and maybe these are the people who will clean your apartment or your room. Okay, so it's or the people who will cook your food because you don't have a full kitchen. So it's not clear how many of these jobs are full-time. Again, this is very, very typical, and often the models don't clearly differentiate, so it's easier to fool people into thinking that these are full-time jobs when they're in fact seasonal or part-time jobs. And just to give you a sense of the kind of jobs overall, direct and indirect, right, that are provided by these kind of projects, this is what the Ernst & Young reported, okay? And so you see construction jobs, again, how many of these, if they are indirect, if they're not hired by the Heartland Greenway people directly, how many of them are full-time? How many of them are only seasonal? Retail trade, again, we know that things like retail, food service, transportation, recreation, agriculture, a lot of these jobs are seasonal. So they give you the peak construction total number just to make a splash, okay? As I said, the model that people most commonly use, we don't know what model they used for this. You know, I don't know if somebody at home, you know, in the basement, some 18-year-old kid just came up with the numbers. We don't know because they don't give you, they don't give us enough information to decide that. But we don't know what the quality of jobs is. And so we cannot ascertain what really the realism and the likelihood that the local economy will benefit as much as they say. That's the other thing that was really kind of like worrisome to me. Again, if you look at the construction jobs that Summit had, it was a little over 4,000, but the Navigator construction jobs, again, right here, it's over 8,500. But the Navigator pipeline is shorter than the Summit one. And so I have to wonder how realistic these numbers are. How many people are, they're going to have, almost twice as many people per mile, essentially, as the Summit pipeline. So it's always a good thing to compare and contrast how their numbers look. Since there's more than one pipeline being proposed. The other thing that these kind of I don't want to call it a study again, this kind of claims from the industry have in common is they talk about all the materials, and so all the kind of like the sales that local businesses will have, and how this will essentially multiply, right? There's multipliers into the local economy. Well, if you're buying your materials from Louisiana, again, the persons who are making profits are the sellers in Louisiana. If you're buying your pipes from Texas, those are the people who are going to be benefiting. So it's very, it's disingenuous for them to give you these numbers without clarifying, where they think this material, just like the people who are going to work on the pipelines, where they're coming from. Okay. Otherwise, again, you're inflating the impact on the local economy. So this is the way I think about these things. They are a rhetorical device. They are a way to convince people. They don't have any scientific credibility. They don't have any economic credibility. They have not gone through any process of peer review. They haven't been vetted by an independent party. Somebody is trying to sell you something, and they don't have to be honest in their claims. Like it happens for a lot of other things we buy, and so they will inflate the numbers that they share with people. And again, whoever this is very clear to whoever produces these numbers. This is the name of the game. Even in the case of Ernst & Young and Summit, for example, Ernst & Young was relying on the numbers that Summit gave them. They did not independently confirm those numbers with Summit. They didn't go and look at comparable studies, comparable projects to ensure that those numbers were realistic. They just run the model with the numbers that Summit gave them. So I would say, if you have a kid at home who's really good at Photoshop, you should take this, and instead of $30.5 million, you should have, $30.5. Instead of 17,000 jobs, you should have 17 jobs, because those numbers have as much credibility as the numbers that are right now in these flyers. There is absolutely no way for me, when I did the presentation to the large coalition, I had the Ernst & Young report, and I could really dig into some of the details. There are no details here to dig into. This is just like a black box. And again, it behooves us to be skeptical because these are not independently conducted studies. This is not some professor at the university, who finds numbers and does the study and puts it out for peer review and people critique it. There is no conflict of interest. There is a massive conflict of interest here for whoever conducted the study. And so, again, this is from another paper by Professor Crumpton. The idea here is that these studies just look at one side of the ledger. They only consider this economic benefits, but they don't look at all the costs of these pipelines. And a lot of the costs are costs that will be incurred by the communities for decades. Okay, let's think a little bit about what some of these costs are. Who benefits and who pays the costs? So one thing that's being shared by several people, especially in places like Iowa, where we have the Dakota Access Pipeline, right? And so we actually have empirical data where we can look and see what the effect of the pipeline has been on crop yields on the right of way, right? And so this is an article that came out in 2020, people at Iowa State University, and essentially you can see that within the 2 years that they had to study, there were significant reductions in yields. And there's several other people working on these issues. This is from a master's thesis. It's going through the process of peer review now from Ohio State. That was just, the work was just completed. I believe the student just defended this past May. Okay, so again, we have yield losses. Sometimes Summit did this. The Voyager guys didn't do it. The Summit number had a kind of like top of the line cost for compensation for farmers for the right of way and costs of the right of way, but they don't specify what those costs are. And so I can't say, are they making correct assumptions about the yield losses, or are they underestimating the yield losses in their right-of-way costs? One other thing that I think personally has been understudied is the loss of property values. And so this is a working paper. So again, this is going through peer review. This is really new stuff that is coming out now. Wendong Zhang was at Iowa State and is now at Cornell. And one of the problems in the past with these work on do pipelines and pipeline accidents reduce the value of houses is that they tended to be localized. And so you would do it just in one place. You didn't have a lot of information. It was a small number of houses. It was just one occasion, right? But these guys have got a huge data set. You can see here 17 million house sales, 864 incidents, the whole country essentially. And what they find is that there are significant impact on property damage, on property value. So if your house is near where an accident occurred, you will have to sell it at a lower price. And this lower price will persist. So again, this is a real loss for landowners because they have an asset, right? The house that essentially is losing value just by proximity. And so this is not just a farmer issue. This is a rural landowner issue as well. So it's a broader issue. And again, this is, I feel confident, bringing these numbers out because it is such a large number of sales. And so really the errors will kind of like be smoothed out, okay? So this could have repercussions for counties, right? Because they depend on property taxes, but also, and I don't know how it is in central Illinois, but certainly in rural Iowa, what happens sometimes is you just can't sell the house, right? Because it becomes unattractive. And, we've seen this happen with confined animal feeding operations where, the odor is such a problem. Everybody in the neighborhood knows, and so nobody wants to buy, okay? And so there can be real consequences for people in rural areas. So another thing that, again, I think is understudied and we don't have good solid numbers is what are the costs of preparedness for local communities, okay? So this is a very, very recent report from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and it's a CO2 pipeline rupture in Mississippi. And what you see here is that the local emergency responders were not informed by the company. And so they actually went in to address the rupture without knowing what it was. They evacuated the town, but if you look up at this diagram on the upper corner, the studies that the company had done, their own analysis said, oh, this town is not going to be in the path of any plume, so we don't have to worry. And they were wrong because the town was. And so they had 200 people evacuated and people taken to the hospital. Again, a lot of the costs of these activities are borne by the residents, whether it's people losing work days, whether it's the emergency management personnel, having to work overtime, and the stress that all this is going to cause. And I also wanted to put this out there because I think we need to be honest with ourselves, and we don't really have the monitoring capacity. I live in Iowa, and I used to live in Illinois, and our state agencies are not funded well enough to really be on top of these things and be prepared and be proactive. So what we're going to have is we're going to have reactive kind of approaches, and a lot of the costs will be borne by private citizens and the communities that these pipelines go through. The other thing that I think is really, really important, and in fact for me is really critical, is this opportunity cost idea. So Summit estimated that per year, and this, by the way, was before the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. So this number is going to go up substantially. I would say it's probably at least going to double for Summit. They were estimating they would be getting over $400 million a year in subsidies. And so my question to you and my question to our legislators is that the best use of $400 million? I don't know, because Heartland Greenway has not put out those numbers, how much they think they're going to get in subsidies from the federal government via the 45Q provision. And by the way, this is an underestimate also because all these companies, what they want to do is they then want to sell the ethanol to California for their low carbon fuel standard. And so they're going to make more money on top of that. They're going to get a premium for their ethanol. So they're going to make more money on top of the federal subsidies. Is this the best way to spend all these hundreds of millions of dollars? I think this is a real question that we need to ask ourselves. Again, a lot of these jobs are temporary. There are environmental costs. There are potentially health costs. Okay, so we are paying for this, right? This $400 million that Summit is going to get is my tax money, your tax money. And so I think it behooves us to really consider whether, especially in places like rural Illinois, rural Iowa, that is the best use of public money. Opportunity costs, right? There may be other things that have better returns for local communities than this. One thing that I have found in all this thing with the pipelines is that a lot of times the reporters, they just receive this glossy pieces of paper and they just basically read copy. And so if you're working with reporters, if you see a report, something in a newspaper, the journalist's resource has a whole thing about being critical about economic impact studies, so that they can themselves be critical and really look at the numbers, the disclaimers, and who's done the work. Okay, I think it's very, very important in all this that we keep our eyes open and be diligent in our in our roles as informed citizens. So this is from a report that was done after during the Keystone pipeline, the Keystone XL pipeline, which was kind of like a really big one of these projects. It was done by people at Cornell who did not have a conflict of interest, and they scrutinized in detail the Perryman study that was a lot more thorough than what Voyager has put out, and they arrived at this conclusion. They inflate the projections for everything, essentially. And these one way I like to frame this is those are advocacy documents. They are not documents that should really be used credibly by people making decisions about pipelines. Those are sales pitches, essentially. And this report again is available online. But another example of this that was discussed by my colleague at Iowa State, now retired, Dave Swenson, again in the case of Keystone, because Keystone required an environmental impact assessment. Actually, the State Department did their own environmental assessment, and so we can directly compare what the Perryman study, the one that was commissioned by Keystone, versus the State Department numbers, which were not inflated. You can see the difference right there. The job estimates by the State Department were nearly 2/3 lower than the first Keystone study. And this is a big problem, by the way, that we have, because typically we don't have this check. Typically what happens is they come out with these numbers, right? And then if the pipeline is built, nobody goes back and checks, wait a second, was that right? And so we don't have a counter argument, right? But in this case, we do. And so we know the extent of the inflation. And so the argument I would make is every time they say, 9 jobs, they mean 3, and take all these numbers with a grain of salt. And so what I want to conclude here with is, again, these numbers are meaningless. You can put any numbers. If you have again, a kid who's good at programming, just put a random number generator and make like a little visual, gadget online, because we have absolutely no way, given the scarcity of information provided, to determine whether these numbers are any good.
I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I think we had a marvelous discussion, great presentation. I want to add a special thanks to Dr. Secchi for her insights and her information. It's been wonderful. I want everybody to know that our coalition stands ready to work with local officials, with emergency responders, health and safety officials, individual landowners and residents to better understand the impacts of CO2 pipelines and prepare you to respond as you're called to do. This webinar has been recorded and will be made available on our website. Again, it's www.noillinoisco2pipelines.org. And everyone who's registered for this webinar will be sent a link to the recording in the next couple of days. So please feel free to contact us at any time. Go to our website for regular updates. And thank you again for being here. And with that, I wish you well and bid you good night.
Goodbye. Thank you.